there's this statistic you offer in the book. It's a study of other studies, and you say that there's a total of 515 studies the study looked at that found that chatting with someone from an outgroup cut down prejudice 94% of the time. And so I think certainly in this political cultural moment we're in, crossing a divide is uncomfortable. It's something we don't want to do. We see the other group, whoever that group is, as something different, alien, harmful, toxic, fill in the blank. But that statistic showing its efficacy of conversation, lowering prejudice, seems to be a requirement if we're truly interested in preserving the democracy that we currently have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people have been talking for years about the lost art of conversation. And yet we seem to be getting farther and farther away from creating the conditions where it becomes easier. Not necessarily through our own fault. I mean, we just went through a pandemic where it was literally dangerous to be together. And it's not just having conversation, it's understanding when conversation is actually there and when we really only see a shadow of it. So, for example, texting with someone, you get text, you get maybe emojis and some photos, right? But you're not really sure that you have each other's attention. You're not really sure that you can speak, with your whole expression coming up. And then in person, that's when we have the full toolkit of these conversational communication abilities that humans come equipped with. But it has become so difficult, both because of the lack of opportunity, but also because of this enormous fear and distrust that we have of each other. We're judging each other more while engaging each other less, which makes our judgments more reckless.
I have to ask you about your biography because I can't help but think that it's informed your work. Can you talk to me about your parents? And I guess the follow-up question to that is, to what degree do you think that you've been so curious about this topic of bridging gaps because of the experience you've had in your own family?
I mean, it's writing a book isn't easy. You need a lot of drive, and by far the personal drive came both from my journalism career, where I have found it so possible to understand people without judging them as a first step, and also from my biography. So my parents and myself and my brother were all Mexican immigrants. I very naturally flowed toward the liberal side, the Democrat side. And I remember the moment when I came home from high school in the year 2000. My parents had just been naturalized as U.S. citizens and could vote that year. And I saw the Bush-Cheney sign over my mother's desk. And I just, it didn't occur to me, all these arguments we'd already had politically, they're Republicans. What? And so, that just started a whole host of very fascinating conversations, sometimes very loudly in Spanish in restaurants in New Hampshire. I think bothering a lot of people, but of course they couldn't understand us, so whatever. Yeah, and then there was that sharp contrast, especially as 2015 came up and that presidential campaign. Just a real contrast between the heat that my parents and I made in our conversations, intense heat. I mean, we yelled, right? I mean, it was not easy. It was not like Zen or angelic, but we could have the conversations and we could cook up understanding. And then contrasting it with so many conversations that seem to burn relationships, burn bridges, and not create understanding at all. It create an understanding that you should never talk to this person again. So it was that contrast combined with so much else that absolutely played an enormous role in my drive to write this book.
Did you or did your parents ever think there might be a moment when it was a bridge that was too big to, let me start that again. What was there a moment when the divide was so great that either you or your parents thought you might not be able to bridge it?
Yeah, there was a moment. I did the wild thing and watched the election results with my parents in 2020 because I wanted to put myself in an environment where I could hear the unfamiliar and create that friction that we often don't have. And before the election results came in, I went on a walk with my dad, and my dad he basically said, he's kind of a reserved guy, but he said, I know about some people whose children, whose grown children won't let them see their grandkids anymore because of
Mm.
politics. And I wonder if that will ever happen to us. That's the way he said it. And I immediately said, like, no, Dad, that won't. That's a personal commitment of mine. But it was interesting to hear from him that was something that had crossed his mind. And there's been a moment or two over the years where I've thought, oh, I've gone too far. I've gone too far. And it turned out I didn't, but in the moment it really did feel like I had. And so, those are moments that in conversation make us aware of how there's so much more than just being right or persuasion at stake.
Thanks for watching this video clip of the Speak Good podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please check out our full conversations on your favorite podcast directory. We've spoken with everyone from the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution about what it was like to be the founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, to a member of Congress who describes his day job as being in the wrestling ring, to an expert storyteller who helps us understand how we can use stories to help us achieve our business goals. Thanks for watching.